G'day there guys, welcome back to In My Shed. I'm BC. As soon as I get a bearing ball, I'll be putting the table back on the Haro grinder, but I thought I'd point out a few things about the table here and give you a look at the bearings. I think I finally found out how they work, and it's not what I expected. This is quite a good setup, well and truly overkill with a heavy duty roller bearing to go inside the hole for the spigot to swivel the table. Now I can't see that I can swivel it after I've put it on, and I don't know how I managed to get the two tables not in line. I must have pivoted one each way on the lifting hook when I set them down, but this is probably a fair bit better than what the Jones & Shipman 1302 was. You can still see the original flaking, albeit a little bit dirty, but I've washed it all down in Haro and it seems to be in fairly good nick. All of these surfaces just need a little bit of clean up, but that'll be cleaned up once it's up on the grinder. It's bloody inconvenient to do where it is now. Up on the grinder will be a better place for me ergonomically. But yeah, very, very good setup. There's dead space here and here. Yeah, sorry. So the table swivels or slides on this face, and that face. And they're all in really good nick. A bit of a wipe up with kerosene, and I went over with a paint scraper, and there's no great amounts of shite to come out of that. Okay, I'll swing the camera around and give you my thoughts on how I think this ball race assembly works. Okay fellas, it had me a little bit perplexed as to how these things work. There's only 150 mils at either end. It's 300 mils, but the table moves 470, and I couldn't understand how you could do that, except it's the ratio. These balls ride about a third of the way up on the V-way, so the radius from the centre of the ball to the point of contact is about 5mm. The top table has a flat in the centre that rides on the top of the ball, so it's running at a radius of 9.5mm. So that gives you the multiplying effect. For each turn of the ball, the top of the balls goes further than the bottom, and to locate it sideways, it's got flanges that come down and locate on the side of the ball. There's not much force there, it's fairly accurate, and with these things you don't have to be as accurate as you would think, because mostly you're only grinding on a cutting edge that's 3mm or 5mm across, like the end of a slot drill or a annular cutter or a tap or whatever. It's different to surface grinding, where you want a consistent figure over the whole length of the job. My old Rong Fu grinder has done thousands and thousands of cutters, and there's a little bit of wear in the V-ways. They're just plain V-ways, the same as the Clarkson, and you grind on the forward stroke, and as you pull back and the little gear meshes with the rack slightly further out, it pulls the table across and you grind a little bit again. It's only about a quarter of a thou movement, but it's noticeable. But you still get good, well-ground cutters out of it. So that's the sprocket for the chain. I will try the original chain mechanism to see if I can get it to work. If it doesn't work, I'll just put a lever on the side here and another lever down to the table. That'll be good enough for the work I do. I'll bring it around when the table's back up on top of the machine and I'm giving it a bit of a clean down. Bye for now. G'day guys, back again. Finally, I've got some room in the shed. Loco trolley is out. The table is back on the Haro grinder. Only the swivel table to go up on top. But I did a bit of checking with my multimeter yesterday to see if I could find out what was going on with the wiring loom, and I got a whole lot of infinite resistance. In other words, nothing's bloody hooked up at this end. So I can see why my old mate was scratching his head and couldn't do the wiring. And the drum switch isn't too bad. Luckily it's marked M1, M2, M3 and then T1, T1, T3, so it's fairly easy to figure that out. But I'm just about to lift the motor off and I see what I can find in there. Well, this was a surprise. The table went right back on absolutely easy, and it rolled really free. And the one ball bearing that was missing, this whole table that the motor mount the spindles on moves through the belly of the grinder, and one of the balls had rolled in under along with the chain. So I had lost it, but it was refound fairly quickly. So I'm going to lift this off, not on camera. I don't struggle on my own with bloody lifting hoist. I don't have a gantry, but I've been thinking today I could probably modify one of the Haro Forbes units. I'm going to put a hole in the wall behind me. I'm sheeting in next door. You've all heard that story a few times. And when that happens, I could use a gantry internally, but I can't have the full width at 3 metres. It just wouldn't fit the decor, shall we say. Okay, I'll lift this off cam and I'll bring you back and we'll find out what surprises are in there. Well, back again, guys. This is part 2. This Swiss gear is made that well you can't pull the bloody head off without a couple of little bars. Beautifully made, and I've got to say, outright electrically it's about 14 feet ahead of the Poms. The old Kearns borer, the wiring is very, very disappointing. This stuff is all high temperature wiring, and not only that, it's in plastic conduit, but look at the bloody connector pins. Like, this is seriously good stuff. So we've got 2 looms going down through the turret, or whatever you want to call it, that matches up with what comes out the other end of the conduit. 3 green wires, 3 red wires, and up here we've got 3 yellow wires and 3 blue wires. I think there might have been a bit of a repair in there. I'll get a torch. I can't see any repairs, but anyway. While you weren't watching, I put a mega on all the motor leads. They all come up trumps. Insulation's good, and I'm pleased with that because this is a precision ground assembly. I'd hate to be losing that, repower it with something else and gradually introduce more and more vibration. Although this works on quite an unusual collet system for holding the wheel arbors, I'm confident it will run really smooth and give me good service. It's also got a spindle lock for changing the wheel, so yeah, everything works well there. So then I thought I'd check the resistance, and phase to phase on surprisingly both coils very, very similar, 34 to 35 ohms, and very pleased with that. It means that the insulation is good, the coils are all intact. Next I'll chase through the looms and make sure that nothing's defrayed down there. I don't like the on-off switch. There's a little box downstairs with what looks like a pack of fuses and a rail. It's like a bloody open bus bar. Like, be a good place for a rat to get across. But I think I'll put in circuit breakers and a bit more modern gear than that. Maybe motor temp overload. But yeah, so far pleased. This looks like it's not going to give me any grief. I'll drop it onto the table, and if it's not too heavy I'll put it on the floor or crane it out of the way, and then I can get to work on the rest of the wiring and check that and clean this table up, get ready to put the swivel table back on. So far so good, thank God. G'day there guys, something else a little bit different with this grinder. It has a removable dust cap, which I'll show you in a sec, and a adjusting nut for preload on the bearing. Now this little cover just slides off with a bit of a knife knocked in behind it, and with this bearing injector tool I squeeze grease into the old bearings. It worked on the other tool and cutter grinder, so I don't see why it won't work on this one. And now I'll see if I've got something that'll fit in that collet that's small enough to grab with the battery drill, and I'll give it a spin up and see what it's like. So 3 noisy tool and cutter grinders all come good with a bit of grease. This hasn't seen any grease in there for about 40 years, so I just hope it responds exactly the same. Okay guys, back again. I could hear the screamers out there, put new bearings in it, don't grease it. Well, one problem with that is there's no visible fastest from the outside, so I've been thinking about that. Somewhere around here there'll be screws that have been bogged over and painted, and I don't want to strip it all off to find out where the bloody screws are. It's electrically proven to be good. with the Mega. I've just put some grease in the bearings. Now this was rowdy, just turning it by hand. And that sounds fairly good to me. Just let the trigger off very, very slowly. Don't dump the trigger. But don't ask me why, I know that's no good. I'm quite happy with that, the way it runs up. Another shock, this is a metric machine made in Switzerland, but it's got a 17.44 collet size, which is 11/16 imperial. Like, who are they trying to kid? That's not bloody metric. Ah. Okay, bring it back when something else happens. G'day guys, back again. You may as well come in on the hard work, the cleaning. I use a fairly varied technique. The first, wipe over the flake surfaces with a bit of kerosene, just as the basic clean-up. And in the meantime, over the areas where the grind's accumulated for years, I'm using citrus spray. It's a fairly good all-round sprayer. Now with the kerosene, I use steel wool, or this case stainless steel wool. You can use a lot of products there, and I see quite a few guys using Scotch-Brite products. You've got to be very careful that you clean up well afterwards. Scotch-Brite is non-woven nylon spun into a mass, sprayed with phenolic resin and then dusted with abrasive grain. It can either be aluminium oxide or silk carb, but as you use it and that grain becomes blunt, it's then shed off the strata, off the web, and dropped into your cast iron surfaces. And if you don't really clean it well, you're just putting it to bed with a bloody bit of wet and dry in there, and it's going to give you a lot of grief. Okay, so I'm into the yuck with a little bit of steel wool, then a fairly blunt old scraper to see if there's any lumpy bits there. If you find a few lumpy bits and you've got to take something off, all these clips manual scraper, that works quite well. In here there's a fair bit of exfoliated rust, even though the dial cleaned up quite well. It's not a critical area, but I don't like to leave things in that condition, so for that particular one I'll use a bit of vinegar. This seems to give the rust a bit of a hurry up, and it pacifies it a bit. It sets the rust black. I don't know whether that's iron sulfide or whatever, but I found with the cylindrical grinder I used a lot of different products, and on rust itself the vinegar proved the best. It also sucks up quite easy with the paper towels. Finally, as I've done here, I run over it with a slipstone just to see if there's any high spots, and there are quite a few. This table suffers more from corrosion than from wear, so if you run over it, you can soon pick up, yep, there's not so much high spots, there's spots in between the corrosion. It's still a beautiful, well usable table, but if someone's left a big burr, yeah, there's a bit of a lump there. You can soon get rid of that and bring it back down to a good functioning table. And the good thing about these stones, when they fall on the ground and become three, you don't have to dry, they're only $5 to $6. Cheap renovation. Oh, one thing that you might find, pressure packs or squirter bottles that will withstand industrial chemicals are few and far between. I used to use a brand called Canyon, and they were sold as industrial spray packs, and they went off the market because they were expensive, or the distributor was greedy, I don't know which. This is a brand I picked up at the dollar shop. Zilch is the brand. Why they would call it that, I don't know. They're beauties. I've had degreaser in them, citric acid, vinegar, water, and you come back a month later, pick them up, dust the squirts, and away they go again. They're about $4 each, and I'll recommend them. Worth every penny. Okay, once I've cleaned all this down, I'll turn the little table or top table over, give it a good clean underneath, lift it on and then work on the surface of it. But so far I've checked the electrics, they're all okay. I spun the motor up with the drill and it's nice and quiet inside, so yes, the resto is worth it. It's worth putting some time and effort into it. So you can't rush at these jobs because they will not go any faster regardless of how hard you try. And all the little farty bits I've got in our kitchenette here in a little ultrasonic cleaner with some dish drops in hot water. Bring it back when it's a bit more together. Well guys, got it physically up to the point where I can say yes, we will continue. The table moves extremely freely and that in itself presents a bit of a problem. I'm used to tables with a lot of friction, like dovetail tables, and they don't go slam into the stop at the other end. Luckily I have some spring-loaded stops, so I'll be manufacturing these to fit into these slots here and using the spring-loaded stops up against the fixed stop. Table slides or rotates quite easy. I think I've got it back into reasonable condition. If it's going to be too much grief to get the chain drive, there'll just be a lever off this wheel and a rod to the T-slot. I'll operate it manually like that, and at least then I can fit in a small shock absorber to limit the speed the table can travel at. So please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next issue. It'll be, well, probably a week before I figure out what we're going to do with the wiring, etc. I have to have a good look at the switches and try and trace where the links go through. Bye for now.